Welcome, folks, for the demo for the Monolith of Mysteries, our second texturing assignment. We'll be working off of this object here, which I already have some stuff open in my UV editor that I can turn off. Let me go, and 4. Okay, so you should be seeing this in Maya. So this is a Necron monolith, just for someone knows. So it's this thing. So that's what I have modeled for you here. Now, this is different from our Rubik's Cube because it's not entirely just squares. So big aspect of what we were doing on Tuesday was that when you projected your faces, when you did the planar map, everything was square, so it was like really easy. You didn't, there's no mistakes to be made. But the real problem with making your UV maps are what to do when things aren't square. So how do we make things look appropriate? How do we make the shells reflect what they look like? So reminder of our order of operations. Select, map, move. That's what we did on Tuesday, and then today we're going to add in the final step, which is to unfold a shell, which is essentially just a fancy way of saying we're going to fix the shell. So comes in not right, Maya does a little operation, cleans it up, and it accurately represents the face. So a couple of things to go over that we just sort of loosely touched on when we got started with this stuff on Tuesday. So 4, 5, and 6, just like they do stuff in the 3D space, they also do similar things, but not the exact same things, in the 2D space of the UV editor. So 4 is going to be your wireframe mode, so that'll just turn your shading off. And 5 will color the faces with a particular shade depending on certain things. So let me go into my UV editor here. So we got, if I got this selected here, 4 is what it currently is now, where you can just see through all the shells. 5, it will shade the shells based on the factor that it's calculating is whether or not the normals are facing the same direction as the UVs. That's the fancy way of saying it. Don't worry about the colors so much right now. What I would just say is blue is good. So when you see blue, everything's good. So, and then 6, as we learned the other day when we were making the Rubik's Cube, will display textures. We didn't assign a texture to the monolith because you don't normally have a texture assigned when you're UV mapping. So we don't really need 6 on right now. But what we do need on today is a very particular texture, and that is this box right here that looks like a checkerboard. Oh, I see what she did earlier. Okay. Which is this checkerboard pattern. And so if you turn that on and you have your object selected, you'll be able to see this checkerboard. And this represents the veracity. That's your 50-cent word for the day. How accurate, the truthfulness of the representation of this UV. So now you can see on the top, all well and good. You can see those squares and read it very nicely, but not so much around the rest of it, right? And this is upside down. How does that even happen? So that's what we're going to use as we try and correct our shells. Now, QWER, same stuff as in the 3D space. Those are your move, select, rotate, scale, all that good stuff. Camera controls, nothing changes except since you cannot rotate in the 3D space, the camera, or the 2D space rather, Alt and left click is just an additional way of panning. So save yourself a middle mouse button click. And then 2 new selection modes. Just UV selection mode, that's for individual UV points. And then UV shell if you're selecting a whole shell. So that's like when we were on Tuesday selecting all of the leftover tic-tac-toe boards, so to speak, and moving them into one area. Okay? So now we're going to talk about, we talked about on Tuesday how to use the planar map from the UV menu, which is, the OG way of doing it more or less. So UV editor right here is where you're always going to want to go. We talked on Tuesday about this little box here, the planar mapping options box. But what we're going to going forward, what we're going to use is we're going to use what's called the UV toolkit. And so I have mine attached to the side of my UV editor. I believe that is the default setup, but if it's not doing that for you, you can just take this and nest it onto the side of this. And then that way, you have all your tools. Now, there are many different tools in here. I won't bore you. What we need are these two menus here. We need to create UVs, and we need to unfold UVs. Okay? So these two parts of the UV toolkit are what you need open. So let's go through our mnemonic. Select, map, move, unfold. So let's do the first 3 steps. I'm going to start with one of these empty sides here. And this is where I will point out, if you find it's a little cumbersome to be selecting these faces and stuff with the checkerboard on, if you think it gets in the way of you seeing things properly, feel free to turn it off in between while you're doing your selections. I certainly have issues. I have old person eyes. So, you know, don't be shy. So there we go. I'm going to double check this with my isolate select, make sure I didn't select anything else. That looks accurate. And so what I've selected here, all of the connected contiguous faces on one side of the monolith that are facing discretely in one particular axis. In this case, it is, I want to say the x-axis, right? If I put my move tool on, you'll notice I see the green arrow for my y-axis and the blue arrow for my z-axis, which is a telltale sign that this is in the x direction, right, with the red arrow. So if I want to project this from the x, be careful when you're moving this around. Yo, what's up? Sorry, we got started a little early. I don't know if you're waiting outside for the bell to ring.
No, I was just waiting for the car.
Oh, well. Don't worry, we just got started. So we got these selected. Now we want to do the actual planar map, right? So there is this button in the create that says planar. So it's the exact same thing as you would get from doing this and go in the options box. Now, what's great about this button here, if I hover over it, it'll be hard for you folks to read out there, but if you do it on your end, you'll be able to read it. And it's going to tell you, if you use particular mouse button to click this button, it will do your planar mapping from a particular direction based on which button you use. Now, for starters, if you shift left mouse button, click this button, it's going to just bring up your options box straight up as we did on Tuesday. So there's our old friend from Tuesday. Now, I have my settings set to project from X currently, so that won't matter. So what I want to point that out is because I have my current settings are set to X, left mouse button says it will project using the current settings, which is to say my left mouse button clicking on planar will project from X. But you'll also see that by default, if you middle mouse button click the planar button, it will project from the y-axis. In fact, hold on. I'm going to move this shell out of the way because it is much cleaner when you don't have your main shell in the 0 to 1 space. This is where all of the UVs just get generated. This is the central space in the UV space. And let me reselect what I was going to project here on this side. Boom, 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 boom. Okay. And so you'll see now if I left mouse button click, boom, I get a project from the X. Middle mouse button click on this planar button, I get it projected from the Y. And if I right click on this button, it will project from the Z. And obviously that doesn't look right either. So, reminder, as you project shells, there's only one copy of each face in the UV space for each face that's in the 3D space. So if you make a mistake with your map, just remap it and it will reset the shell for that face. So in my case, this is a project from X. Boom, projected from X. Great. So we've done select, we've done map, switch to my move tool and get this folk off to the side here. I'm going to put my checkerboard pattern on here again. And if you look at this, you can see it's a little stretched out, not quite square. And so now the final step, folks, is this down here in the unfold section. Do not get trapped by, there is a button that just says unfold. That is not what you want. You want the unfold along. So for this, you'll notice there's a U and a V that you can toggle between on this unfold along. What's important about the unfold along is not whatever direction you choose first. The important thing about unfold along is that you follow the same order of operations throughout. If you start with unfold along U and then do unfold along V, you need to do that throughout so all of your shells, as much as possible, retain similar proportions. The more you do this properly, the less you'll have to clean up at the end. So if you do it improperly, more work for you later. So I'm going to unfold along U and V. And so what you can see now is that these squares are big and they're square. So let's go back over here to the notes. Boom, we talked about unfold along. We'll talk about this UV shell question in a second. So unfold, that's the final step that we did not talk about on Tuesday, rather. Sorry. And unfold is Maya running an algorithm to correct the shape of your face based on, where you took a picture of it from. So it's important you use the right axis to give Maya the right starting point. So you make sure you project it from the right axis and then unfold it. And so there's two things that you'll check for. First thing, if it's unfolded properly, you'll get squares. Okay? So the unfold will give you squares if it's properly unfolded on the checkerboard texture. But the next thing on here, it will tell you want to check the size of the shells relative to one another. So here's your example. You have two patches of grass next to each other in the game, right? Except the UVs are screwed up. So on one patch of grass looks fine. Next patch of grass, the UVs are screwed up and the texture is gigantically stretched out and looks super pixelated. Really obvious that there's problems there for you. Everything that has the same texture should share the same proportion in the texture, right? So it all looks the same throughout. So what will happen is if I'm up here, let me go ahead and project this shell so that it separates from the original shell. So you do have to project it. This is going to be from the y-axis, so I'm going to middle mouse button click on planar. There we go. So that's select and map. We're going to switch to our move tool and move this up here. Get it out of the way. And then you'll notice when I unfold, because it's a largely square shape, no problems. Just like yesterday, it didn't need it unfolding. It already looked good. But you'll notice not all unfolded shells are created equal. So the shell needs to match whatever you choose as the size, the main size of your shells. Going forward, everything's going to need to be scaled and sized to match that. So if I decide that I'm going to stick with the size of the squares that are on my top faces here, let me zoom out, then that means that this shell here, so I'm going to use my UV shell, so UV shell selection mode, boom, I can select that. Go to my scale tool, and if these squares are bigger on here, I need more texture, which means I need to make this shell bigger. And you'll see as I make this shell bigger, the boxes get closer in size. And then if you need to move this shell around a little bit so that you can get the checkerboard to line up. You don't need to have the checkerboard line up, but if it helps you with getting the shell sizes accurate, then you definitely should do that. But if you can eyeball it, good for you. So there we go. Now those shells match up pretty well. So let's go through. And now I'm going to do these on the inside of these little pointy ears. And you'll notice I'm grabbing all four of these faces on the inside here because all four of the faces that I've selected, I'm going to my isolate select, these are all oriented with the Z direction. Two of them are oriented positive Z and two of them are oriented negative Z, but they are both oriented across Z. So we want to project these on the Z. So I'm going to right click on the planar button, boom. These are for the top area. Let me undo that. Switch to my move tool, I'll bring these over here. You want to work organized, folks. You want to keep faces together that are close to each other in your UV space. You have infinite space to use, so no need to be picky. Now, I've got these over here. I'm going to unfold U and unfold V. Now again, your mileage may vary. So these ones, the unfold, I followed the same order of operations, but they didn't end up the exact same size. So now I need to adjust these at the end by scaling these down to make the squares bigger. And there we have it. So there's those. Then we get here. Okay, and then same concept, but the other direction. This is in the X direction, so left click on this. That'll planar map on the X. Do the same thing, bring these up here. Unfold U, unfold V. Then we gotta scale these down, and you can cheat because they're the same size as these ones, obviously, so. Cool, very nice. Okay, and then we would just need to obviously get these little squares that are up here. Those are facing the Y direction because they're pointing straight up. Boom, projected. Move these over here. They're squares-ish, so you don't really need to unfold them, but they're not perfect squares. So now I would just need to check these squares seem a little big. There we go. Okay, little scale there. Now, down here is where it's going to get tricky. Also, I do want to show the door side, actually, because people screwed that up in last period. So there's a door on here. I don't expect you to texture inside the doorway. That's just for fun, because the monolith has a door. But what it does have is there are faces that go around and underneath the door that you want to get in this shell so that it more accurately represents the shape of this. So I'm going to go into my isolate select again. You can see those are the faces I have selected for this projection. I'm going to put on my move tool, and that'll tell me that it's facing my Z direction because of the blue arrow. Right click on planar, boom. Project that from the Z. I'm going to switch to my move tool, and we'll get this up over here. And then unfold along U, unfold along V. And then, in this case, it looks like I'm going to need to scale this up. Honestly, this will be the same size, so I can just kind of cheat. Boom. Bueno. Sometimes the colors for the shells don't update out there, so you might right-click and click back on it. But so for these little bottom pieces here, don't forget them. Don't you forget them. So do keep in mind that these faces are not visible from the y-axis, rather. So if I go and try and select this, let's see how well this works. I don't think it's going to work well. So what I have selected, I missed two faces over here. I forgot to get these. So if you try and do this big old long strip here, keep in mind that just because it's all contiguous and stuff and connected, it's not necessarily going to all be able to be projected from the same direction. In the future, I don't think we'll talk about it much, but you can sew together shells that you've projected from different angles so that you can get the most accurate shell possible by projecting from multiple angles. But just to show you what might happen, if you planar map this from the Y, you'll get that. If we go over here, move it out of the way, we'll go unfold U and unfold V. Even if I do it a few times, it's really not going to get good looking. So here, let me scale this up. So there's mad distortion going on over here and stuff. So again, you don't want to get those huge pieces connected together. You would want to project the insides of this. Whoops, let me turn this off. So so we get this and this. Let me turn off the checkerboard to make life easier for you folks. And this and this. And heck, this is also facing the same direction, so we can also get this. Boom, right? We got all these faces, these 6 faces right here. These are all facing the Z direction, as we can see from this arrow. So right-click planar. I'll move this over here, and this is going to be my little bits and pieces yard. Boom, unfold, boom, unfold. If I turn on my checkerboard pattern, turn off isolate select, now you can see. Cool. They're good, but the squares are the wrong size. So we'll just quickly scale these down. There we go. Still think those are too big. Okay. And then you would do the y-axis ones after that. Okay? So, them's the instructions. And then don't forget the bottom too. The bottom, folks, something that people screw up often. There's triangle, there's all of the faces that are around here, right? These triangles here. This is a quad, actually. But then there's these little triangles right here, too. So don't forget those when you're projecting the bottom. All right. Questions, comments, concerns? I am going to stop the recording now.